Once a horseman understands the nutrient requirements of the various classes of horses and has selected the feedstuffs that they're going to feed, it's time to develop and implement a sound feeding management program. It's often been said that feeding management is an art, and I guess it is, but it's an art based on a science. And the science deals with understanding nutritional concepts, having a knowledge of the feeds and feedstuffs that we're going to feed, and then understanding horse behavior. And then where the art comes in is tying all those things together so that we can make the necessary adjustments in our feeding program so we can maintain the desired level of condition on our horses. In this feeding management video, we're going to start and we're going to talk about the basic feeding design and classes of horses. Then we're going to talk about how to determine the weight of our horses and how to condition score them. Then we're going to talk about storing hays and feeds, then feeding hay, then safely feeding concentrates, and then we're going to finish up and talk about managing eating behavior in our horses. If we follow the guidelines presented in this video, we should be able to put together a feeding management program that will meet the nutrient requirements of all of our classes of horses in the safest, simplest, and most economical fashion. Horses require different amounts of nutrients in their diets depending upon their age and activity. The nutritional classes for horses are mature idle, such as this gelding, mature producing, like this gestating mare, mature working, such as this cutting horse, and growing horses, such as these yearlings. Feeding horses by class simplifies feeding programs and is the most practical way to meet all horses' nutrient requirements in the most economical fashion. When feeding by class, managers usually select one of two basic feeding plans depending upon the available hays, concentrate feeds, and the management. Plan A is to feed the same roughage source, for example grass hay, then feed one of 3 or 4 different crude protein concentrate feeds, the concentrate fed depending upon the class of horse. Plan B is to feed one well-balanced 13 to 14% crude protein concentrate to all horses and then feed either legume or grass hay to meet the nutrient requirements of the various classes. Many large operations use the latter plan due to its simplicity. How much should a horse be fed? This NRC table shows the recommended feed intake by horses as a percent of body weight. Notice that recommended forage and concentrate intakes are given in ranges. To utilize this table, a horseman needs to know only 2 things. 1, the class of horse being fed, either idle, producing, working, or growing, and 2, the horse's body weight. Obviously, one of the most accurate methods of determining the weight of the horse is to physically weigh them in a livestock scale such as you see here. Many research farms, such as this one, do routinely weigh horses, and also more and more all the time. More breeding farms and also more training stables are weighing their horses so they can adjust their feeds so that their horses can be at the desired level of condition. However, most operations don't have scales like this, therefore we have to use some indirect methods to determine horses' weights. We're going to bring this gelding out here and we are going to discuss 3 of the indirect methods. The first method that we're going to talk about is the visual or just the eyeball method. Actually just look and guesstimate how much you think this particular horse weighs. And what I'd like to do is to get everyone that's looking at this video right now to take a pencil and write down and commit to it what you think this horse weighs. We'll give you just a minute as the camera scans the horse for you to write down his weight in pounds. You should have a weight down. How accurate do you think the weight that you just wrote down is? A study was done at the University of Florida back in the late 80s that answered that question, where they took a set of horses and they took a group of horsemen, and they asked that group of horsemen to actually write down, guesstimate the weights of those horses. The bottom line of that study was the majority of the horsemen, about 80%, underestimated the weight of those horses by at least 150 pounds. So visual observation may not be the very best way, obviously, to get weights on a horses. The second way, indirect method that we use to get weights on horses is with a heart girth tape. Heart girth tapes are available from feed companies and livestock suppliers. And when we use a heart girth tape, we put a horse on level ground, we put the tape over the highest point of the withers, be sure that there's no twists in it, and we actually get a measurement in pounds on the tape. Justin, what's this horse's weight?
916.
Okay, he's 916 according to the heart girth tape. And the heart girth tape is, or has been, tested by research and is a fairly accurate method, indirect method, for determining the weight of the horse. The third method we're going to talk about is a newer method where we use a body weight formula. And actually it's an extension of the second method in that we start and we do get a measurement in inches of the horse's heart girth. This is a different tape. You need a tape that's about 75 inches in length. And again, you take the heart girth measurement the same way, only this time you get it in inches. Brandon, what do we have?
69 inches.
69-inch heart girth. All right, we're going to write that down. The second measurement that we need is body length. And when we take the body length, we go from the point of the horse's shoulder, we go back his side, and we go to the buttock or the point of the pelvis. Justin, how much we got there?
71 inches.
Okay, we got 71 inches. All right. Now, the formula says heart girth times body length divided by 330 should give us the weight of this horse. So, I'm going to punch that in right now. 69 inches times 69 inches times 71 inches equals, divided by 330 equals 1,024 pounds, the weight of this horse by the body weight formula. So in summary, the formula said 1024. The heart girth tape said 916. I'm not sure what your guess said. We'll see how close you are. And incidentally, the scale weight, the most important weight, was 1,000. So you can see all of these weights that we took were within 100 pounds of the actual weight of the horse. Determining the weight of the horse is a very important skill for a horse owner to obtain. Now, having a body weight, we can utilize the NRC table to calculate how much feed a horse requires. According to the table, a 1,000-pound working horse should be fed 15 to 30 pounds of total feed daily, composed of 10 to 20 pounds of forage and 5 to 20 pounds of concentrate. This 1,000-pound gelding at light work should be fed 20 to 25 pounds of total feed daily, composed of 10 to 12 pounds of forage and 10 to 12 pounds of concentrate. These amounts can be adjusted slightly upwards or downwards to achieve the desired level of condition. Feeding horses by body weight is the ideal. However, from a practical standpoint, many horsemen don't feed their horses based on horses' weight, but according to their horse's condition. Condition in horses is very important. Researchers at Texas A&M University and several other schools have shown that the amount of condition, or fat cover, which is actually stored energy, influences many physiological functions. Fertility in brood mares is very predictably influenced by the degree of condition, as is optimal performance in riding horses. Progressive broodmare managers, trainers, and now even horse show judges are condition scoring horses. What is condition scoring? Condition scoring in horses first started in the early 1980s here at Texas A&M as a result of some research that was conducted by Dr. Don Henneke and Dr. Gary Potter. I'd like to share with you the condition scorecard now that's published in the 1989 NRC publication, horse publication. This is the condition scorecard, and actually when we're talking about condition, we're talking about degree of fatness. Scores range 1 through 9. 1 is poor, 2 is very thin, 3 is thin, 4 is moderately thin, and then they range on down until we get 8, that is fat, and 9, that is extremely fat. Across the top of the scorecard are 6 anatomical locations where we actually evaluate the amount of fat or condition on the individual horse. That's his back, that's his ribs at mid-barrel, that's his neck, that's his shoulder at the forerib, his withers, and his tail head. When we condition score horses, some cautions. One of the things we need to do is be sure that we are evaluating fat. Sometimes in the wintertime, a horse will have long hair and he will look fat when in fact he's not. It's important that you palpate these areas so you can actually get a handle on how much fat this horse has. Also, we do not want to confuse muscle tone for fat, because a horse can have a lot of muscle tone and not be carrying very much fat. And then the last thing we do is after we evaluate the fat at these anatomical sites, we compare the fat on this horse to the descriptions on the scorecard, and we assess a score either in full units such as a 6, 7, 8, 5, or it can be in half units. Let's condition score this horse as a practical example. We'll evaluate his back first. It looks like that we have a slight crease down his back. His ribs at mid-barrel, you can not see the ribs, but as we're palpating here, the ribs can be felt. The neck, we see running our hand down the top of the neck that the neck blends smoothly into the shoulder. The forerib, right behind the shoulder, we can see just a little fat pocket right there. That's a little amount of fat. The withers appear to be rounded. We don't have any sunk-in places behind the withers, so we rank that as rounded. And we say that this horse has a moderate amount of fat right over his tail head. So, Brandon, what would you score this horse?
I score him at a 5.5.
That's about where I think he needs to be, about a 5.5 on the condition scorecard. Researchers over the past 10 to 12 years have done a lot of work looking at the optimum degree of condition for brood mares. Now there's a lot of research being done on high-performance horses to see what kind of condition they need to be carrying. And if a person is going to do the very best job feeding their horses so that they perform at their maximum, we need to know how to use the condition scorecard so we can feed horses to the proper condition level. In any feeding program, proper storage of hays and concentrates is critical to maintaining nutrient quality. Most important for hays is protection from moisture. When storing square bales in buildings with cement floors, stack hay on pallets. Where dirt floors exist, even more insulation from ground moisture will be needed. This method, utilizing tar paper, wooden pallets, and a 3-inch layer of old hay, protects the bottom tier of bales from moisture damage. Some farms or ranches feed round bales to horses. Round bales can be stored inside or outside, though most are stored outside. When storing round bales outside, take precautions to minimize deterioration of the hay from both rain and ground moisture. To minimize rain damage, lay bales on their sides and push them tightly against each other. Placing round bales up on cross ties, old tires, or on gravel or dirt terraces minimizes the wicking effect or the uptake of ground moisture into the bale. All concentrate feed should be stored to keep them dry and protected from insects and rodents. To keep sacked feed dry, stack it up on pallets. Bins, barrels with tight lids, and feed boxes protect feed from rodents. Feed rooms should have doors, yet be well ventilated inside when doors are closed. Notice the scales in this feed room. Some ranches, farms, or stables store feeds or whole grains in bulk bins. Bins inside should be kept clean and dry. Avoid storing commercial feeds for more than a month to assure feed freshness and nutritional value. This USDA map shows regions in the United States where insects may be a problem in bulk stored grains. Persons in regions 3 and 4 should consult with their local county extension agent for recommendations on controlling insects in grains. Horses are non-ruminant herbivores or grazers, and innately they have a need to forage or chew long roughage. A minimum level of long stem roughage, 0.75% to 1% of a horse's body weight, generally satisfies a horse's roughage needs and will prevent digestive disorders. Horses grazing high-quality pastures easily eat enough forage to meet their daily long stem roughage requirement. A high percentage of horses, however, are maintained in dry lots or stalls where the only roughage they receive is what is fed to them by their owners. When adequate long stem roughage is fed to stalled horses, they appear satisfied and typically do not develop abnormal stall habits. For example, this stallion, weighing approximately 1,000 pounds, has a minimum long stem roughage requirement of about 10 pounds per day. When horses don't receive adequate long stem roughage over a period of time, they often develop certain characteristic stall behaviors. Horses can start chewing wood, eating bedding, and in some cases will eat feces. Horses maintain in groups, often chew out each other's manes and tails. Horses that chew wood, due to the lack of long stem roughage or because of available exposed softwood in stalls, or just because of plain stall boredom, often develop a habit called cribbing. Cribbers hook their top teeth over a solid object, such as a manger, a trough, or a drinker, and pull back, ingesting large gulps of air. This habit is extremely annoying, destroys stall equipment, and is almost impossible to break. Worst yet, cribbers can get gaseous colic from ingesting large quantities of air. Wood chewing and cribbing may be mimicked or learned by other horses. Therefore, prevention is critical. First, provide plenty of high-quality, long stem roughage each day for horses. When constructing stalls from wood, use hardwood lumber, such as oak, paint exposed wood with creosote, and or install metal sashings over easy-to-chew boards. Some horse owners feed hay cubes. Others feed a complete feed where both ground hay and concentrate has been incorporated into a pellet. Cubes and complete feeds can meet a portion of a horse's daily roughage requirement. However, some long stem roughage is usually offered daily as insurance against behavior problems. Hay should be fed from some type of feeder or manger which minimizes horses ingesting dirt, sand, or fecal material. Obviously, this method is not ideal. Hay feeders and mangers should also minimize horses' exposure to dust, which can cause or aggravate existing eye or respiratory problems. Hay feeders should be designed to be safe, easy to fill, and designed to keep the leaves, the most nutritious part of the hay, from falling to the ground. Here is an ideal combination hay and concentrate feeder. The feeder is mounted at eye or chest height. It has a tray to catch hay leaves. It is easy to fill from the alleyway. And lastly, it is safe for horses. This ground-level corner-type hay manger is also popular among horsemen. When on the road with horses, temporary type hay mangers may be needed. Hay nets are used by many horsemen but are hard to fill. Hay nets should be tied up securely and highly with a non-slip knot, not like this bag which has slipped down where a horse could get a foot caught. Hay bags can catch leaves and are easier to fill than hay nets. In certain situations, horses may have to be fed hay in the pasture. This combination hay and grain feeder is ideal for young horses in pasture. feeding hay on the ground is not ideal, but is acceptable if the ground is dry. Feeding round bales is simple and can be economical. Cattle ranches use metal rings encircling round bales to decrease hay wastage. However, the use of rings with horses may cause injuries and should be avoided. There are very few problems associated with feeding too much good quality hay to horses. However, colic and founder caused by the improper feeding of concentrate feeds is a great concern to all horse owners. Before discussing how to feed concentrates, let's look at how the horse actually digests these concentrate feeds. The horse has a two-part digestive tract. The foregut includes the stomach and small intestine. The hindgut includes the cecum, colon, and rectum. Three limitations exist within the horse's stomach. First, the horse's stomach is relatively small, only about 8% of his total tract. Second, the stomach contains a small microbial population, which, under certain conditions, can produce extremely large quantities of gas. Finally, the stomach has a one-way esophageal valve where the stomach attaches to the esophagus. The second part of the horse's digestive system is the hindgut, where a large microbial population digests forages through fermentation. Under normal conditions, the majority of starch included in concentrates and grains is enzymatically digested in the foregut, with little starch ever reaching the hindgut. When horses are improperly fed a much higher than normal quantity of concentrate, whether by an error in dispensing feed, feeding two meals too close together, increasing the concentrate amount too abruptly, or changing concentrate quantities abruptly, serious problems can occur in both the foregut and the hindgut. First, in the stomach, the microbes often produce more than the normal amount of gas. Since the horse can't belch or regurgitate like the cow, the gas pressure builds up, potentially causing gaseous colic in the stomach. Also, when the foregut is overloaded with more concentrate than it can digest, more starch than normal reaches the hindgut. The hindgut microorganisms, not accustomed to this larger quantity of starch, produced increased amounts of gas, lactic acid, and perhaps specific toxins. This abnormal situation causes colic and in certain extreme cases can lead to founder. With this digestive tract scenario in mind, recommendations on how to safely feed concentrates will now be easier to understand. It is often said, feed by weight of the feed, not by the volume of the feed. Why is this so? The reason simply is that all feedstuffs do not weigh the same. For example, the block of coastal hay on the left appears twice as large as the block of alfalfa hay on the right. However, each weighs approximately 5 pounds. Hay weights obviously are not correlated with size of blocks. How about concentrates? The horseman's universal feed measure is the 3-pound coffee can. Full of 32-pound oats, the can weighs 2 1/2 pounds. Full of 38-pound per bushel oats, the can weighs 4 1/2 pounds. Full of corn or pellets, the can weighs 5 pounds. All concentrates obviously do not weigh the same. The question then, is it necessary to weigh out the feed for all horses each day? Under the most ideal conditions, feed and hay should be weighed for all horses at each feeding. This practice is followed at many operations where expensive horses are maintained and where feeding management is optimal. Practically, however, feed and hay are not weighed daily on most operations. First, managers know the approximate weights of blocks of hay. Second, managers are familiar with the relative weights of different concentrate feeds, and they often mark cans and other feed dispensing containers according to feed weights. In short, learn the relative weights of horse feeds and weigh any new or questionable feedstuffs. Then mark feed containers so people feeding will dispense the correct amount of concentrates. How much concentrate can safely be fed at one feeding? A concentrate feeding thumb rule is never feed more than about 3/4% of a horse's body weight in concentrate at any one feeding. For example, for a 1,000-pound horse, never feed more than 7 pounds of concentrate at any one feeding. Generally, this means that mature idle horses can be fed concentrate feed once daily. Growing horses, milking mares, or moderate working horses requiring approximately twice as much concentrate should be fed twice daily. In certain unique situations, such as with high-performance horses or with fattening extremely thin, lactating mares, where 15 or more pounds of concentrate might be fed per day, the concentrate should be fed in 3 or more feedings. When multiple feedings are necessary, the multiple feedings should be equally spaced throughout a 24-hour period of time. This optimizes digestive tract function. This horse farm feeds at approximately 12-hour intervals at 6:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Some racehorse stables feed at approximately 8-hour intervals, for example, at 5 o'clock a.m., 12 o'clock noon, and 6 or 7 o'clock p.m. Note the card on the stall showing how many pounds of concentrate and hay each horse is to receive at each feeding. When feeding performance horses, workout time should be taken into account to allow adequate time for digestion. On this well-managed racehorse farm, the 5 a.m. feeding contains about 1/3 of the racehorse's daily concentrate allowance, but only a small portion of their daily allowance of hay, accounting for the early morning workout schedule. Large portions of hay are then fed after the workout at the noon and 6 or 7 p.m. feeding, when horses will have ample time for eating and digesting hay. Horses are creatures of habit and are responsive to consistent feeding schedules. Horses fed on a consistent schedule are less likely to go off feed and seldom develop stall vices. On the other hand, horses fed on erratic schedules appear annoyed in the stalls and over time develop stall vices such as digging, kicking, or raking their teeth on stall walls and fronts. Worse yet, colic and founder can be caused by hungry horses bolting their feed. In short, set your feeding schedule and feed at the same time every day, holidays, and Sundays, 365 days per year. Note this farm's feeding program, the classes, the pounds of concentrate, and the hay to feed, and the feeding times is written and posted for this feed crew to see and follow. Sometimes it may be necessary to increase feed quantities, change to different concentrates or hays, or change to different forms of feeds. For example, unconditioned horses being conditioned for racing or showing will require significantly larger amounts of concentrates as they are exercised more to get them fit. Extremely thin lactating mares must be a condition score 5 to be a suitable breeding candidate. In these situations or others where dramatic increases in concentrate quantities are necessary, increase the amount of feed gradually over a 10-day to 2-week period of time. This gradual increase in feed intake allows the digestive tract and its microbes time to adjust to the increasing nutrients it must digest. Sometimes it may be necessary to change feedstuffs due to changing nutrient requirements of horses or changes in availability of feeds and their cost. Some feeding changes could be made immediately, some require a few days, and some will require a week to 10 days to assure a safe changeover. Changing from one textured concentrate to another, when both concentrates have fairly equal energy concentrations, represents only a slight change and can be done over a 1 to 2 day period of time. At the other extreme, changing horses over from a ration high in oats to a ration high in corn represents a significant change in energy concentration. Take a week or more to make this changeover. Changing physical forms of feed, such as from textured feed to a pelleted feed, can safely be done over a 4 to 5 day period of time. When changing from grass to high-protein legume hay, take 3 to 4 days. When changing from grass hay to a lush pasture, take 2 to 3 days to gradually increase the hours horses spend on the pasture. If this gradual changeover is not practical, fill horses up on hay before turning them into the lush pasture. In short, avoid any abrupt changes in feedstuffs offered to minimize digestive disturbances. Occasionally, hay and/or concentrate will not be cleaned up. Refusals are a warning sign suggesting the horse was overfed, was fed the correct amount but something was wrong with the hay or feed, had limited access to water or a change in water quality, is sick, or possibly the horse has teeth problems. Remove uneaten or spoiled feed and hay from the mangers and feeders daily. Investigate the problem immediately. Tradition plays a big part in feeding horses. While many traditional feeding practices are based on sound information, certain commonly accepted practices are not sound nutritionally and in fact may actually be detrimental to the horse. Let's look at 3 of these feeding practices. Home mixed rations, composed of cereal grains, often need to be supplemented with calcium and phosphorus to provide a proper balance of nutrients and to meet requirements. Horse owners traditionally feed calcium and/or phosphorus minerals, free choice, cafeteria style, in a separate feeder in the stall so the horse can balance his own ration. Cornell researchers have shown that horses do not possess nutritional wisdom for calcium and/or phosphorus. This means horses don't have the ability to balance their own rations by knowing which of these minerals they need and how much of each they need to eat. The bottom line, feeding cafeteria-style calcium and phosphorus does not work. If calcium and phosphorus mineral supplementation is necessary, purchase a balanced mineral mixture, including salt, in loose or preferably pelleted form, and top dress it on the grain at the manufacturer's recommended levels. Feed companies' concentrate feeds are specifically formulated to meet the requirements of specific classes of horses. Balanced mineral blocks can also be used. In spite of this fact, 25 to 50% of horsemen answering surveys by Texas A&M University researchers top dress a protein, vitamin, and/or mineral supplement on their already balanced concentrates just in case the feed is lacking in some nutrient. This practice is expensive and when overdone can cause serious toxicity problems. Supplements are needed only when concentrates of unknown or questionable quality are fed. If it is necessary to feed a supplement, feed only one. Feed it exactly as recommended on the label. Do not overfeed. Milking mares and sweating working horses will drink considerably more water. These horses on pasture are being watered in a large trough equipped with an automatic float valve. Stalled horses are often watered from buckets, so horsemen can monitor how much water horses are drinking daily. Obviously, bucket watering is time-consuming and Automatic waters should be installed with no exposed hoses for inquisitive horses to pull loose. Partially chewed grains and/or hay from horses' mouths can accumulate in horse waters, souring the water. Dirt frequently gets in automatic drinkers. Horsemen should check automatic drinkers twice daily to be sure drinkers are working properly and that the water is clean and fresh. Provide clean, fresh water to all horses on an ad libitum basis each day. The only exception is the extremely hot horse after a workout, who should receive only a few swallows of water at 10-minute intervals until he is completely cooled out. This prevents cold water from causing spasmodic colic in the horse. All horses require salt. Horses on pasture, not receiving commercial feeds, should always have free choice access to a trace mineralized salt. This salt should be fed in a clean, rust-proof container, preferably protected from the weather. The decision of whether to feed block or loose salt depends on the climate. In humid climates, blocks are recommended as they crumble, and horses can easily consume their salt requirement. In more arid climates, where blocks won't crumble, loose salt is recommended. Stalled horses fed cereal grains, such as oats, should always be provided with a trace mineralized salt block. Stalled horses being fed commercially feeds, most all of these feeds containing 0.5 to 1% added salt, usually won't need supplemental salt. The exception to this is the performance horse that is sweating excessively each day and that may require more salt than is being provided in his feed. Free choice white salt should be offered to these horses to meet their needs. Feeding times for horses typically brings out some characteristic behaviors which can result in injuries to horses and damage to facilities. Let's look at some of these behaviors in stalls and pasture settings and how to manage them. Feeders and stalls should be located so horses are never afraid to eat because of competition from other horses. Solid, full-length partitions between stalls or partial partitions at the feed boxes between stalls discourages horses from fussing or fighting with each other at feeding time. In this public riding stable, all horses are fed at different times each day. Note the wall partition and the front grill to keep horses from reaching into each other's stalls and also to protect the water hose. Mounting feeders at the center front of each stall would eliminate a great deal of the feeding time competition between these horses. Horses should eat slowly, but some poorly managed horses become very aggressive and bolt mouthfuls of feed, root feed out of their troughs, or drop feed as they move away from their feeder to watch aisle activity. Fast-eating horses can be managed by feeding in large, shallow troughs, placing bricks or smooth softball-sized rocks in troughs, or by feeding extruded feeds or chopped hay mixed in with the grains. Rings mounted in troughs or troughs with lipped tops or grooved sides prevent horses from rooting feed. Mounting feeders where horses can watch routine barn activity while eating also helps minimize feed wastage. Feeding horses individually is optimal, particularly for those horses requiring large quantities of feed, such as growing or working horses. In certain management situations, however, individual feeding is not practical. Therefore, horses must be fed together in groups. Foals and growing horses can be fed in groups with little problem because their dominance hierarchies have not yet become established. With increasing age, however, horses will develop their pecking order, and feeding time will bring out these aggressive tendencies. Turning 3 aged geldings into this pen with feed in only one trough demonstrates this aggressive feeding time behavior. Which gelding is first, second, and third in the pecking order? Which gelding will eat the most feed at the expense of others? Could fighting and injury become a problem if this were a smaller pen? To manage this situation, when group feeding is practiced with older horses, feed as individuals by providing feed for all horses plus 1 or 2 extra feeders, by placing feeders in an open area, and by placing the feeders 20 to 30 feet apart. Using rubber feeders that cannot be turned over prevents injuries to horses and saves time for the feeding crew. Old, crippled, foundered, or blind horses require special feeding management. These types of horses can be included in groups with other horses, but it is best to group them by themselves, or better yet, manage them individually. This 26-year-old world champion producer is kept in a stall and paddock by herself. She is fed chopped hay and a high-fat pelleted concentrate. She is still producing foals due to optimal management by her owners. Horses in pasture settings, even with ample roughage and exercise, often chew the bark off trees. This behavior may be related to boredom or possibly the taste of the bark at certain times of the year, but is not caused by a nutritional deficiency. Chewing bark off trees doesn't kill horses, but it will kill trees. Wrap trees loosely with old fence wire to prevent bark chewing. Is exercise important in a feeding management program? Yes. Stalled horses, especially those fed large quantities of feed, need routine daily exercise to maintain regular eating habits, desirable stall behavior, and their health. Exercise for stalled horses can be provided by riding, lunging, ponying, exercising on a mechanical walker or a treadmill, or by turning horses out in turnout traps. This stallion station manager exercises all of their world champion caliber stallions by turning them out in small exercise paddocks for 2 hours, 6 days a week. Stall behavior, health record, and general attitude of these stallions is always excellent.